All right, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. This is actually the first one of the month, and so excited to be with you all. We have an amazing panel of leaders who are just super sharp and incredible to be with and have amazing backgrounds. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment. I will say I'm not worthy to be part of this panel. I'm looking forward to learning myself. I will hand it over to them in just a moment, but wanted just to touch base on a few things with all of you. This for the first time we're sort of coming together for a bit now, and we have a lot planned this year. But for the rest of this quarter, we are doing a series of webinars that are really focused on diversity and inclusion. We know that for many leaders and organizations, this it's a really sort of challenging strategic path to sort of navigate. And so we're trying to bring as many different voices into this conversation as possible so that we can learn from each other. I don't think, and please challenge me, I don't know if there's one company yet who's figured out how to do this, perfect. I think we're all learning, we're all on this path together. And so I'm hoping that through these series of webinars that we can all sort of walk away with some bits and some things that we can really try ourselves. Also, one thing I really wanted to point out is March 23rd, we're having a diversity and engineering summit. Very excited. We're lining up the speakers now. It's going to be a huge event. You're going to get information about that. I think we may be even dropping some information on that in the chat for that and some of our upcoming webinars. So please look at that. Please attend. Again, another opportunity to learn from each other. Just and another quick note about this recording, we will actually send the recording of this webinar out at the end of the week to all of you. So please look out for that. So don't feel like you have to scribble down everything you hear. You can rewatch it. We'll try to summarize it for you as well. But we want this to be an interactive time. I love healthy conversation. We love being challenged as well. And so we are designating some time at the end of this to have some questions. And so what we ask for you to do is to please chat your questions in the chat box. We're going to get to those in sort of the last probably 15 minutes. We're going to make sure that we have time for that. If I do one thing correctly today, it's make sure we get to questions. But we're going to do that, and we encourage you to do that. You have some incredible minds on this panel today, and they want to offer their experiences up to you, what they're seeing out in the market, what they're experiencing, what they're trying, and we want this to be useful for you. So with that being said, I would love to actually allow our panel to introduce themselves to you. And I think the way to do this, Christina, Manjuri, and Enna, is maybe, of course, tell us, the company that you work for, your title there, a little bit about yourself. But I'd really love to understand, and for you to take a couple of moments and help us to understand what motivates you around this topic. And I know this, and I ask it that way because I think that, so many of us have different experiences when it comes to this. Either we've been impacted directly, we have struggled with creating strategies, but I'm curious where sort of the motivation and the energy comes from for you as individuals and as leaders, and we'd love to hear a little bit about that, and then we'll jump into some questions. So with that being said, Enna, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. Good morning. And so my name is Enna Jimenez, Senior Director, Head of Quality Assurance at Idemia. I've been in technology, IT space now for almost 30 years. And so, in my role, I am responsible for ensuring the quality of the various applications that we host and ensuring that we meet all the various customer expectations. The work that I do today encompasses everything that has to do with digital identity. So think of biometrics, fingerprinting, all of that. How do you identify an individual? And so that's all around the stuff that I do. It's super exciting. As far as why this is a topic that is of interest to me, I think that as an Afro-Latina woman who was in technology for many years, where I was usually the only Black woman in a room of white male. I sort of got to learn very on that I have to kind of do, double, triple the work to kind of be noticed and to create opportunities for myself, because usually there wasn't no one else looking out for me. And so that sort of created a passion for me to create opportunities for others coming up behind me, to not have it so tough. Right, to just create a space where there is equality and equality in terms of access and opportunities, both from a promotion perspective or just being able to, get that job, right, that you want. And so that's something that I have just made a life mission to do. And I've worked with many different organizations, just trying to connect them to finding more employees, more, especially Latino candidates, who are oftentimes just don't know who to network, who to contact, and how to break through and sort of get their feet inside that door. So that is something that I'm very passionate about. And it just makes me super excited. So I'm excited to be here.
Enna, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for the vulnerability. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Manjuri, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Jason, and Enna. That was lovely to hear. Thank you for sharing that. I'm Manjuri Sinha, based in Berlin. I have about 16 plus years of experience in HR and TA leadership. Currently, I head up technology talent acquisition for OLX Group, which is one of the biggest classifieds groups for the emerging markets in the world. And I've worked across India, Czech Republic, Sweden, and Germany, and proudly call myself a Berliner now, so love the city and this is home. The other hat that I wear in my current organization is so we have work streams for diversity and inclusion. And I also kind of wear the hat of the head of the higher work stream. So that's one of the kind of passion side of my activity as well. How did I get interested in the topic? I think one is super personal. Just I think similar to what Enna said, being a brown woman in technology, I've seen that I've mostly been a single person in the room, as well as had to definitely, work harder and also sometimes ask for things that other people may not need to ask for, and ask for projects, ask for opportunities, and so on and so forth. So that's one. But also on the professional side, I think I've had great experiences like my stint with Accenture, especially, that really taught me how to be systematic about diversity and inclusion and how you can make positive strides and the concept of allyship as such. So these are the two reasons why the topic is super close to my heart.
Manjuri, thank you so much. Thank you for that, and welcome as well. And Kristina.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Christina Nieves. I serve as the Vice President of Professional Services at Greenhouse Software. We're located in New York City. I'm also a lifelong New Yorker. As a technology services industry professional for probably about 2 decades, I build and lead teams with diverse skills, technical expertise that really help our customers to achieve business goals through implementation, technical consulting, and data migration services. So at Greenhouse, we believe that the work that we do to help companies become great at hiring really starts with reducing bias in the hiring process, and that results in more inclusive workplaces. So similar to both Manjuri and Enna, I have experienced the same, being a woman in technology, and throughout that career being probably the single voice that represents that in the room has been a challenge, but also being able to work harder to have your voice heard has made it very clear that not only is this important to encourage and endorse, but to promote and to consistently push down those blockades and barriers for others that come behind in order to make these more inclusive workplace environments core and critical to everybody. So in my own personal commitments, I sit on the DE&I Council for Greenhouse, and I serve as the executive sponsor for Black House, which is an employee resource group that is aimed at promoting advocacy and empowerment for employees of African American descent. So I'm really excited to be here on the panel and to talk about the work that we're doing, and hear also as well from my fellow panelists.
Thank you so much, Kristina. Huge fan of Greenhouse. I remember that Daniel, when he actually sold Greenhouse to me back in the days when he was first starting it out, and he was the person selling it. So come a long way since then, but love the work you all are doing there. I know you're doing a lot around D&I, so excited to learn more about that as well. And I realized I didn't properly introduce myself, so I'm so sorry. I'm Jason Medley. I'm the Chief People Officer at Codility. One of my main missions in the work that I do is, one, to acknowledge that I've been given amazing privilege, and with that privilege, pass the mic and give opportunities to people who do not have the same privilege as me. I have deep conviction around that. I'm not naive. I know I've been given opportunities that other people don't have, simply because I'm a white man, and I don't agree with it. I hate it, and I want to make sure that we can give this the voice that it needs, and it's what I'm deeply passionate about. So that's me. With that being said, let's dive into it. And I think to start out with, and maybe Kristina, I think you were sort of getting into it a little bit, and we'll start with you. I'd love just to sort of understand, and maybe from all of you, and again, knowing that different organizations are at different they're sort of on different paths around D&I, but help us understand, where are you guys in terms of D&I, in terms of what role actually D&I plays in your organization today?
Yeah, so I gladly start. So at Greenhouse, we've been working on D&I solutions since the creation of the company nearly 10 years ago. Building thoughtful and data-driven D&I practices is really one of the founding pillars of our organization. So this is prolific and pretty much in the passion of all of our leadership. It really becomes that building belonging brings a culture that doesn't just tolerate differences, but really embraces them. So that's really where the core of all of the innovation that we create, as well as the services that we are offering out to our customers, originate from.
Great. And Enna, what about the work that you guys are doing over there? What does that look like today? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think we've.
I was unmuted. I was muted. Sorry.
No worries.
So at Idemia, what we started to do is creating employee resource groups. And so we've kicked off our Women Employee Resource Group last year. And we've done a number of events throughout the year. And this was sort of a way to kind of just get the company into thinking more about diversity and whatnot. The company has been very intentional about thinking about their candidate pool and which organizations do we connect with to be able to make sure that our pool of candidates is much more expanded as well. So those are sort of the two things that we're doing at the moment.
Love that. And Manjuri, you really quick so we can set the stage.
Yeah, totally. Just will kind of follow up with that. So with our organization, OLX, the organization itself has grown through mergers and acquisitions. The company was pretty much driven as hubs. We have offices across 30 countries in the world. And in the last 2.5 years, the effort has been to bring standardization across different processes, etc. And D&I is one of them. So every country was owning it, running it by themselves. However, this was centralized 2.5 years ago. One of the principles was that it shouldn't be purely an HR mandate. It should be driven by leadership plus from responsibilities from different buckets in the organization. So we pretty much also have a D&I council, which has representation from technology, legal, marketing, etc. And we also have D&I committees in local hubs, because there are challenges. There are certain, peculiarities in different countries that we have to cater to. There are labor law aspects, legal aspects, etc. So to always have that input. And ERGs is something that we've seen also organically grow in the last 1 year. especially around ERG group for LGBTQ within the organization, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we are kind of set up within the D&I space in the company.
No, thank you for helping us to understand that a little bit more. And I think the thing that I know that all three of you have in common, like everyone on this call, is that, or that most of us, we've clearly been impacted by the pandemic, and many of us are now working remote. And I know that, post-pandemic, many companies are going to have a hybrid situation. Some are committing to 100%, being remote. I think very few are sort of saying we're going to go back to sort of status quo, what used to be. But I'm curious how, and Enna, we can start with you. I'm curious how is remote work, how has it sort of influenced D&I strategy for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'll speak about it not just from my organization, but from all the other organizations that I'm very engaged in the community. So I also hear how many other organizations in Boston are doing this. And so, most firms, when we all went home, sort of had the struggle of, well, how do we recreate that networking, that space where we can come together and, especially I'm Latina, so we're big huggers, right? So, and that was part of our, when we met someone, you're like, oh my God, how you doing? Here's a hug and a kiss, right? So how do you recreate that in a remote experience and still generate that warmth feeling that you get when you go to these events, right? And so you just have to be really intentional about creating these spaces and these rooms where folks can come together and still have that engaging conversation. For example, one of the things that I do is I was very much, I'm much of a butterfly person and always talking to people down the hallway. And so in order to recreate that hallway conversation, I would just ping people. We use Teams. And so I would just kind of pop up. I would call someone and be like, hey, how's it going? To kind of recreate a bit of that hallway conversation that occurs, right? And so we've tried to, as a company, be intentional about scheduling meetings with small group of folks to be able to generate some of that same free, open conversation that occurs. I know that some other organizations certainly have had like networking events and happy hours in order to as well try to keep that going. There's one organization where even though everyone was still remote, they still were able to create their panel sessions where different folks were in different locations and were still able to create that conversation. So it was really just about trying to continue the talk, trying to create a networking environment, whether it was playing trivia, just asking some questions, those icebreaker conversations, just to kind of give people the feeling of we're still in the same room, although we're all in our own homes. One of the things that I did in my team specifically this past year was in order to celebrate the holidays, we always did like a potluck event. And so we were able to send gifts to each other, for those that wanted to be part of it. And we mailed gifts to everybody. And then we had sort of like an unveiling of gifts on Teams, right? And so that made it feel like even though we're not together, we're still creating a space of sharing and community and coming together.
I love that. Thank you. And I think so many of us this past year have struggled with, the last thing we want is another Zoom call, right? Where we have to do something. And so I love those creative ideas. Kristina, what about for Greenhouse? So I know that, over the years, Greenhouse has been very progressive and a lot of their views around many things, but especially cultural initiatives. How has the idea of accepting the future of remote work, how do you think about that in correlation with D&I and D&I strategies?
Yeah. So for us, it was probably within a few days where we turned our entire workforce remote. And so we had been planning for this intentionally for some time, being that, removing geographical barriers kind of allows you to additionally source more talent from various locations, not just these cities and hubs. It was always part of what we intended to do. The pandemic definitely accelerated that. And so what we had to do was just think more thoughtfully about how do we continue to evolve that culture in a remote sense so that we are encouraging the thoughtful conversations, the right level of engagement as well across our employees. And so part of one of the initiatives that we also partook in is creating virtual realities sessions where people came together to discuss very heavy topics, things like social injustice and what does that mean to the importance of the work that we're doing? So we did take just the element and the movement that was coming alongside everything else on remote work and just translated that into different pieces of what really constitutes the backbone of belonging and inclusion, and then looked at a reflective lens of how do we promote this to the overall group.
I'm curious if, and we're starting to think about this at Codility. Are there certain groups of individuals, maybe underrepresented backgrounds, diversity groups that have been left out going remote? Are you seeing any trends at all? Are you seeing anything that maybe surprised you or that you didn't get ahead of?
I think that for different groups, what it really kind of highlighted is that when you move the work into the home, there are different elements, right? The folks that are caregivers, the folks that maybe are living in very cramped, tight New York City apartments. And so what we did look at is how could we start to look at inclusivity for each of the backgrounds of where people are coming from, making sure that we're intentional about adjusting work hours for caregivers, for instance, or looking at even our distributed teams. I have teams that run from Dublin to San Francisco, so looking at ways in which we can get everybody in the same Zoom call at the same time. I think it just highlighted for us being more intentional up front about some of our customary norms had to change a little bit and had to be a little bit more flexible.
So I'm gonna push the conversation a little bit further. We camp out here forever, but I really want to go specifically to engineering teams. I think that engineering teams and organizations come with their own set of unique challenges, especially depending geographically where those teams can be based and some of the the history behind those teams. But how do you just as pretty direct question, and for any of you, I would love for you to all jump in and have a discussion here. How do you create a culture of inclusivity and openness, and how do you sustain that, right? And especially as we think about remote work and what that's going to look like, but how do we do that specifically for engineering teams, and is it different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty. Maybe I'll just take a jab at that, and ladies, please follow and also challenge me there. So, we were intending to go remote. In fact, pre-COVID, no one knew that COVID will happen, but we had a pack planned for Poland that was to be completely remote. And the conversations that we had prior to that was about should we have a hybrid setup or full remote. And the decision landed on full remote. Why? Because there was a simple discrimination when you are in hybrid. The two people sitting in the meeting room can still, have eye contact, but the other folks who are on camera in different places will not get the same attention. And it's just natural sometimes that if you're in the meeting room with 5 people, you're looking this side and not at the camera on your left side, and so on and so forth. So that was one very minuscule point taken to say that, if the pack is remote, the pack is completely remote. But this was pre-COVID, of course, and then COVID happened, and there were other considerations kind of taken into factor. And one which really helped us was our well-being barometer survey. It's a pulse check for the leaders. It's a pulse check for the teams themselves to see where they are with the well-being. Simple questions are asked, as in, are you finding different ways? Like Enna was giving examples of having fun with your team in small nuances and bringing that together. Also understanding, having these open hour sessions where you literally ask each other, start with a how are you, and ask about your peculiar responsibilities. Someone might have 3 kids running around, someone might have to handle 2 dogs as such, etc. So, and someone could be a caregiver. Somebody is in a situation where they haven't visited their parents, all the way on another continent for the past 1.5 years because of no travel. So different situations. When you talk about it in that room or in that Zoom call, then other people instantly get, kind of sensitive to it. So this was one aspect that we saw during COVID, and of course even now that we see really helping bring that sensitivity on board for people and teams. Ladies, please feel free to add.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Totally agree with everything you said, Manjuri. I think for us as well, it was, and I do think, Jason, that there is a difference between technology teams and or engineering teams, right? And like your marketing, your finance team. So at first, my company was saying, okay, everyone's going to work from home, but then we want to do like 2-week rotations, giving all once they sort of open things up and you could have like 25% occupancy in the buildings, right? Then who do we bring back in? And so we had a lot of debate back and forth because we're saying, well, engineering doesn't need to go in because we can all do all of our work from our computers, right? There's really no sense for us to come in. But the company was saying, no, but if we're going to make marketing and finance come in, then why isn't engineering coming in as well? And so that was a huge debate back and forth and weeks, months of conversations. And because it was about, do we want, how do you create a policy or a process without making anyone feeling, excluded, right? Or including only one particular group and not the other. So it was very tricky. We ended up just saying, everyone will come in, but then we sort of looked at individual situations and, those that did not need to come in for medical reasons. We didn't want to move people around either. So we had to it was a ton of work to make this all occur. I will tell you, I hope to never have to do that again because that was crazy, trying to make the schedules of cubicles and moving people here and there. That was insane. But we wanted to be fair across everyone, right? But so that was definitely a way where, from an engineering perspective, we were thinking, well, we should be treated differently because we should not have to be in the office, right? And then when you look at how we did our work, we already have teams that are in various areas. So the concept of having conference calls where everyone is on their laptop was something that we already did. So even though we could be in a conference room, we each had were connected to the conference room meeting so that when we talked, the people online can see our faces, right? And not just look at a room where there's just, 10, 20 people and they could not really tell who was talking. So we had already gotten used to that process of having our video on all the time, and that aided extremely well when we went, full online because then everybody was just there. Yes.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. Didn't mean to do that. Okay, I'm sorry. I was going to say one of the things that I've personally gone back and forth is sort of requiring people to have video on or off, right? I don't have kids. I don't have children. I have 2 crazy dogs. You may hear them in a moment. But my life is very different from many other people. And, I was challenged on that a bit early in the pandemic. And it really made me rethink asking everyone to turn on their camera when you're stuck at home, when you may be also homeschooling at the same time. And you are literally like one string away from just like losing everything. The last thing you don't want people to see your home. You don't want them to see you. You're like, and so I started to realize, like, like it was giving people more anxiety and more pressure, like they have to be on, and it was actually affecting their work. But I don't know if there's a perfect solution. I don't know. Did you all find that? Did you see that? Did you make a hard rule around it?
It's funny, Jason, because at least for us, it was definitely depending on the senior leader that was in the meeting. Some people would be more inclined to turn their videos on because he or she had their videos on. What I did in my team and a lot of the meetings that I ran, I said, look, I understand that there's going to be moments where you don't want to have your video on, but at least, every now and then I need to see you. Like, I need to see you. So I would set some certain meetings. When I would schedule the meeting, I would say, I expect video to be on for this meeting. Right. And then all the other meetings, you don't need to have video on. But for this meeting, I want everyone to have their video on. So I would tell them ahead of time so they can plan, they can coordinate. And it usually it was just an hour meeting. I didn't do like a 2-hour meeting expecting them all to have their video on. Right. But I would give them the heads up. And don't get me wrong, even when I did that, there was still a few people who did not have their video on. And then I kind of nudged them. I was like, oh my God, do you want to be the only outsider? Because now everybody has their videos on, right? You're the only one who doesn't. So I did in a playful way to not make them feel uncomfortable. And then, of course, at the end of the day, I still respected people's choice, right? Because if someone truly just felt uncomfortable, then I obviously would not have pushed it. But yeah, we have, even today, we certainly have some general meetings with like 50, 60 people where like a handful of us, especially the senior leadership team, we all turn our videos on, and at least it lets people see us. So I'm a big believer in video on.
Yeah, and we're talking about engineering teams here, and many engineers I know would love to keep the camera off. They're usually the ones where you're trying to encourage them to turn it on. I think maybe it's personalities, right, or whatever. Just moving the conversation along, I really want to switch over just to the recruiting side of things. Building diverse pipelines and making sure. I know this group, we understand the importance of creating inclusive cultures, but I think a lot of people who are watching this today, they're from companies of different sizes, and there's a lot of pressure on leaders today to diversify their organization. So once organizations are doing everything they can internally to create inclusive cultures, then I think the attention goes to the recruiting teams and our strategies and our processes. And maybe Kristina, we can start with you around this, but how do you, if you're starting out and you're like, I needed to build a diverse, candidate pool, I need to, how does one go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the problem we solve for ourselves and for our customers, right? We prioritize sourcing at the forefront of every job opportunity that we have in-house. And so we take the lens of prioritizing diversity sourcing ahead of announcing a role more broadly to the public. We do this internally and externally. And we also take the approach of meeting underrepresented talent where they are, engaging in job boards, for instance, like People of Color in Tech or Black Professionals in Tech Network. And so this allows us to at least start the conversation very early with lots more candidates that we wouldn't have otherwise have attracted that talent. That is what we also encourage as well for our customers. It's make sure that you are looking intentionally at sourcing. And it is a hard part of the process. It's extensive. And when you're in a bind and you need to hire a resource, there's usually a business objective tied to that. So I think it's important to note not to sacrifice that, because in the long run, having more diverse teams helps you solve better problems, right? And so if you don't think about that up front, the issue will be prolific downstream.
How do you, so two things really there on that. One is, first, I love the idea of not kind of opening it up to the public at first. So last week I was on a sort of a similar call. It was more of sort of a lockdown, no recordings. People were a little bit more vulnerable sharing things. And one organization said they make it a habit now. They never post job posts. And actually what they've seen, and they hire about 2,000 people a year. And what they've realized is their pipelines are way more diverse, because instead of spending all your energy on these application flows that, as we know, most of the times people aren't qualified, or you're entertaining referrals that aren't right, you're actually doing the work of thinking about building diverse pipelines. So much so that, like Codility, we've actually made the decision this week that we are going to experiment that and try it ourselves internally. And so I'm so glad to hear that someone else has sort of thought about it that way. But here's my question for you, because this is and you started to touch on it a little bit. And I just want to go a little bit deeper with you on this. Yes, most leaders are terrified that when they think about building diverse pipelines, they have a business objective. They don't have time to do it. It sacrifices time. And I'm wondering for all three of you, is there more that you can share with this? So what if you're hearing this today and you go, I don't have time to get ahead of it. I have limited headcount on my team. I can't, like, how do I ever catch up with this? Like people need I'm going to lose my job if I don't present a pipeline tomorrow. How do you ever catch up? Like, how do you ever get ahead of that curve?
I can talk from my perspective. For us, we are leveraging a lot of our ERGs to partner together and to take really a force multiplier of the employees and go out and have them do a lot of that sourcing too. Referrals are a great way to bring in different candidates into that pipeline. Additionally, you'll see from our plan in March is to go and create Job Seekers of Color as a webinar to discuss interviewing, job searching authentically as a person of color. And so what we're hoping is that events like this that are driven from both our employees and not just necessarily the organization or our talent and acquisition teams, that give us the opportunity to be in different places more prolifically.
Sorry, Enna, I think you're muted there.
Myself again. I'll add to that as well to say that in my experience in my previous organizations, it's really been about being in the community, right, and getting your company out there in these circles where people may not always know about your organization, right? So Boston is very, there's a lot of affinity and a lot of networking events. And so what I've done before is I would attend a lot of these events with a lot of my colleagues from my various organizations. And we just get the word out there about what our company is and how great it is and how much fun and we're having with it and how we enjoy it. And that will then create buzz, right? And then so now you're in these, Black and brown events talking to folks and they've never heard of your company, right? And so now they're going to go out there and they're going to Google it and they're going to learn more about it and they're going to follow up and reach out to you because now they've learned about something. Also, speaking in these type of events as well as an opportunity to share more about your organization, your company, and that also creates another pipeline for folks to reach out to you. And then lastly, what I've also done is engage with a number of different organizations. So I'm very involved in an organization called ALFA, which is the Association of Latino Professionals for America. It's a national organization. We have over 90,000 members, both focused on students, colleges and universities, and the professional sector as well. And so this is an organization that goes out there, builds relationships with, corporate companies in all sectors and industries, and then presents to them, whether it's career fairs, opportunities for career fairs, or opportunities for them to really connect with their membership, right? And so that's been one organization that I've used a lot, but there's a number of others. There's NSBE, which is the National Society of Black Engineers. There's NAP, which is the National American Asian Association. Probably got that acronym wrong. There's Prospanica, there's a number of them. And so in Boston, we actually have held career fairs, all of us together, where we say, let's combine our power of all of our members. And in Boston, I was president of the Boston Alpha chapter. We had over 8,000 members. And so we combined that with all the other organizations, and we held large career fairs with, 20, 30 corporate sponsors who walked away, hiring and filling a lot of their roles. And so it was about creating these opportunities, these pipelines, so that companies have access to individuals, but also from a company perspective, creating your brand and getting that brand known in these communities. Because that's usually the biggest challenge, right? You have your big companies, the Fidelities, the State Streets, right? All these big organizations that are known. And so they have much more of a brand. But if you go to the Latino community, if you go to the Black community, they'll be like, what organization is that? I've never heard of them before. So now you have individuals who are great candidates, can do a lot, but I've never heard of your company, right? And companies don't know where to look for these individuals. So sort of a little bit of both.
It's so interesting. Yeah, and Manjuri, I don't know if you want to add anything there or not, but definitely
I'd love to, Jason. And first of all, I would love to add that a lot of organizations think that hiring and talent acquisition is the answer to D&I. It is not. It is not the only one. So just hiring diverse resources.
You on that? Send it out to the masses. Like,
please do. A hiring manager pressurizing a recruiter to bring the pipeline will never ever solve the problem. So that's the first thing that I want to put out there. And the second is in line with this. I think it's super systematic the way we need to look at it. Absolute great points from Kristina and Enna that they mentioned. I like to call this as my 4-prong model. That is, you need to enable the community. If you looked at simple LinkedIn insights today, there are countries, cities, just if I look at binary gender and countries, cities where you can just take a look, okay, this is Java, this is Golang, you have 12% women there. Sometimes it comes up as 9% women there. This is just LinkedIn. I'm not even going to other boards, etc. So this is where we need to enable the community. That is number one. As an organization that wants to work on D&I, I think that's very important. Second is attraction. Yes, of course, sourcing jams, diversity sourcing jams, they really helps. Guided referral programs also help. However, from the perspective of job descriptions, content marketing, we can use augmented writing tools to ensure that our job descriptions are more inclusive and not masculine in sounding, etc. Then we can look at the selection phase, and that's where, Jason, your world of Codility has really helped me in my previous organization. It still does, because it kind of removes a major obstacle. There are many times when maybe a CV would be rejected because it doesn't have all the 16 criteria that the hiring manager needs. Send them a test. What's the issue? Send them a test. And most of the times, and this is a lot of the times with women, most of the times they are clearing the cutoff marks and actually clearing the whole process, which you wouldn't think so from the resume. And last but not the least, I think, of course, during the selection process, also ensuring that your panel is diverse enough, ensuring that you don't have the decision making only with one person, but rather with a feedback loop where you have those bias checks, and creating an awareness in the organization. The ownership should be with the hiring manager, with the hiring leader, as well as the TA team. If that's the hiring is the KPI that we're looking at, shouldn't be just the recruiter. If it is, then it's kind of, you're setting the whole process up for failure.
Yeah, you will absolutely. Or if, even as the recruiting function, if you strategically feel like it is yours and you're not bringing everyone in, you are going to fail no matter what your best efforts are, right? It truly is a collaborative effort. Because of time, and I want to make sure we have enough time for questions, and Manjuri, you're kind of going there. I want to move to technology just really quickly. And I'm going to kind of merge two questions together here, and any of you can really speak to these. But one is just, first of all, like how can we use technology to either diversify our pipeline or create a more inclusive culture? So if you have any examples of that, would love that. And then also, sort of in parallel with that, I know there's a lot of great, because we are talking about time, and a lot of time, we still have business objectives we have to meet, and a lot of the D&I efforts that we want to do can slow us down. Are there other technologies out there too that sort of help us to automate and move a little bit faster? And bonus points if there's one that helps us automate and move faster and helps us to create more sort of diverse and inclusive cultures.
Well, I can talk about a feature that I'm really excited about for Greenhouse, and it's our name pronunciation feature. So it's one of those simple, obvious things that most people overlook. We have a candidate name pronunciation feature that allows a candidate to record their name ahead of the interview so that the interviewing team can have the correct pronunciation, and it just creates a different kind of experience for that candidate. Very inclusive, very powerful. It's small innovations like that are obvious and just create enormous value. Also, just a number of other things that we do, the nudges that we have inherent to the application allow interviewers to kind of slow down and to avoid instinctive biases that are not necessarily rooted in evidence or tied to the role relevant criteria. So there are some things there that we already kind of think of ahead of the human element and try and just move that along to be more efficient at the work tasks that we're doing through hiring.
Right. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe I mean I already spoke about the augmented writing tools like Textio, etc. Of course, Codility also helps us a lot there. One addition would be to think about, so we do work with Good Time for Scheduling. And I think that is also inclusive in a way that it lets the candidates literally come and choose their slot rather than us imposing our slot on them. So interview slots. So that's also something that can be looked at. In volume hiring as such, I mean, we haven't still figured this out in the world of tech, but in volume hiring, there is a possibility of reducing the human bias, because you can literally have a tool scheduling the interview, moving it to a test or a psychometric challenge, and then moving all the way to a video interview and only having a final round of interview, which would be rather a decision-making round, etc. So I think that's something that we've seen in volume hiring previously with my previous organization with outlet hiring, where this happened. So technology all the way did. Of course, there are different conversations about this whole facial recognition technology, which I'm a little icky about. I'm not very sure if that works all fine, and if that doesn't have our human biases driven into it. But yeah, that's been my experience with tools and technology.
No, thank you for sharing that. I love that, and I know that you spoke to platforms like Textio, which I'm a huge fan of, and how they continue to keep sort of in improving there. Kristina, I want to put you on the spot just a little bit, and I'm watching some of the questions coming in, and some of these questions we've already hit on. So as they come in, I will make sure to call these out. But one of the things I think we haven't figured out through technology very well yet in ATS is the idea of sort of blind CVs and how to carry that through an interview process. Have you spent many cycles on this? Are you talking about it? Do you have, best practices around it? I feel like we haven't really solved this via technology in the best way yet, but help me understand. I'm curious, big player in this space, and I'm curious what your thinking is on that and how you, and if you're thinking about that from a product perspective even. Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot. I know we didn't talk about that before, but
no, not a problem. Absolutely. So Manjuri mentioned it. Automation through the recruitment process actually eliminates some bias up front. So we use very specific criteria and attributes as well as qualifications to give us an initial screen. Now, it doesn't give us the ability to eliminate the human element overall, but it gives us a good lens of looking initially at candidates that meet similar criteria without informing any additional or including any additional human influence. Another thing that was referenced earlier was just removing that opportunity for unconscious bias at different stages. So one example is with the take-home tests and having them more anonymized to reduce the potential of influence. So we do that consistently as well, especially when we're hiring for engineering roles. We can see the take-home test content. We are able to provide an unbiased opinion on the grading process. So that is something that we inherently do as well through not only the application front, but also in encouraging our customers to adopt the same practice. For your other question about how does this now become like the evolution of, I guess, efficiency, I think that it's kind of, a combination of things. We are looking at various tech stacks to see how could the combination of these different things influence some of those behaviors, make us more efficient, make us more accurate. We are tracking lots of different metrics across different various KPIs so that we can look at not only the hiring progress, or at least that progression through from candidate to actual job, but overall the employee lifetime value. And so that's a big part of the work that even my team is doing in hiring maturity and looking at what are the various behaviors that we're influencing from start to finish that make really that important hire, because that resource is responsible and accountable for some important business outcomes. And when we look at engineering, I mean, finding the right talent is core and critical to success. So those are a little bit of the things that I can kind of speak to. Curious to hear anybody else as well.
Well, we do have a follow-up question directly at you, Kristina. So someone says, you mentioned that D&I is embedded in innovation and services of your organization. Could you expand on that a little more and give some examples of these influences and their respective results? So I think you've spoken to it a little bit more, but maybe more of the results side. Like, what are you seeing? Like, which features are you seeing people use the most and they actually have the biggest impact?
Yes. Nudges as part of our DE&I inclusion feature set is very, and over the course of the year is the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workforce. We've seen that have a significant impact. Also, part of what on the development side, we've established a privacy, product, and data ethics committee, and so we are looking at even deeper what kind of algorithmic bias could be introduced, and just looking at this, as I mentioned earlier, across the tech stack. So not just from Greenhouse, but any influence coming from other products that we're using in order to go and drive towards that outcome. So I can say that for the most part, this is work that's ongoing. It's very nascent, obviously, and it's a very important thing to take a look at, because consequences in some of these products, as well as the technology itself, we need to have some ability to take intervention on that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. So as we sort of wrap up here, I want to ask one final question of all of you. And I'm always mindful that people in these calls have different budgets. Some come from very large organizations that still don't have very much budget. Some are in small organizations that have huge budget. And so, I'm just wondering if there's one or two things that each of you could maybe share, and you can even triple down on if we may have already spoken to it. And if you believe in that hard and you really want to push it through, please do. But something that doesn't require much of a budget, but there's something that folks can start doing today, that or sort of practical D&I activities that will either help your pipeline and help hiring efficiency, or will help build a more inclusive culture in your organization. Something that doesn't require a big budget.
Yeah, Jason, I think most recruiters always want to know, right, that even if they don't have the big budget buy-in from their leadership, how do they go and push for this? And and necessity is the mother of invention, right? So sometimes, for example, we're talking about Textio. Textio is not super cheap as a tool, so you have to invest in it. It has its value, of course, but you do have to invest in it. So when you're looking at maybe augmented writing, look at an option as simple Google. And I saw this on a recruiting forum very recently. Some recruiter was super innovative to figure out an article that says you can literally do that, pretty much a lot of it with Microsoft Word, if you know how to. So it's just simple, or use freewares that are available for similar tools. If as a recruiter you have to parse blocks of your job description, I think that's pretty much done for this. You don't need a budget, you don't need permissions, etc., etc. So these are smaller ways, and as Kristina was saying, sourcing is a recruiter's world, right? That's totally in my control. So there, it's not, even when you're sourcing and literally plugged into your laptop, not even your hiring manager controls you there. So you literally can go in and ensure that you're looking at the Boolean searches, you're looking at the taglines, you're looking at she, her, whatever you're concentrating on. And to Enna's point on the ERGs, that's where you can also get in without, again, those are setups, those are communities. So you're not investing heavily unless, it's earlier times, there used to be a little bit beers and pizzas. You don't even have that, or wine, to be superbly inclusive here, and maybe orange juice. But so finding alternate ways of doing that and seeking help, asking, I think these are minuscule things that even folks can do. And there's sometimes Learning Academy in a lot of organizations have formulated unconscious bias trainings, which people don't even know of, and they go out and buy expensive products. So these couple of things that recruiters can themselves do and maybe nudge their interviewer, hey, take this up. Again, looking at the interviewing panel doesn't require a lot of money. Look at your interviewing panel. Is it diverse? How can you make it diverse? Maybe put in different nationalities, maybe backgrounds, anything. Simple things that recruiters could do. And I'll shut up. Sorry, said too much.
Lots of great nuggets. Thank you so much for sharing that. Enna, what about from you?
Yeah, no. So, I absolutely agree with all of that, Manjuri. I think ultimately there's probably one aspect that we haven't really touched on in this conversation, which is once you hire the candidates, how do you keep them there, right? And so I wanted to take this opportunity, since I know we're almost done, to just touch on that just for a second, because I think it's equally important, right? We can do all of these, things that we've all talked about, working with the organization, being in the community, right? Being intentional about where we're getting that pipeline and getting them in. But if we don't equally are intentional about what their experience is once they're in their company, then they're just going to leave, right? So now you create that revolving door. So I'd be remiss if I didn't just touch on that for a second. I think that creating a space where you welcome, especially your people of color candidates, right? So whenever I know that there's someone joined the company, I actually reach out to them, whether they're in my group or not. And I've been able to, through that, I've been able to get other allies to do the same thing as well. It's like, hey, this person joined. And not because we're trying to kind of call them out and then say, oh, we've got another person, right? But another person of color, but because we want them to know who we are, who are some other people of color, individuals in the company, and let them know that there's a network of folks that are here and that are going to be ready to support them. And so I think that that's just super important for us to do that. And to make sure that they feel like they have a voice and a space to be able to speak up. And then, as far as other nuggets, I think my biggest go-to really is working with the organizations. And yes, some of these organizations that I've mentioned do have a corporate sponsorship fee. There are numerous ways that by involving your ERG members, having them just be members and attend those events, that you can also connect to them and still reap the benefits of these large memberships. So.
All right. And Kristina, one thing really quick, just one thing you'd like to leave us with?
For sure. Plus one, and everything you just said, plus one too. In addition to that, mentoring. So we also take the ability to buddy up a new employee, especially a person of color, buddy them up with someone else within the organization so they can share similar experiences. But agreed, once they're in the door, you have to keep them. And so inclusivity doesn't stop at the end of hiring.
Great. And one thing I'll just add really quick, just really a tool, an assessment recently that I took that is amazing, is free to take, so Smart Recruiters just released a diversity in hiring assessment. It's quite lengthy, but even taking the assessment and going through the questions, you get so many ideas and it gives you a full report on the other side. It is amazing. Go there. We could probably drop it in the chat or we'll email it out, but it is an amazing tool and they've just recently launched it and I highly recommend everyone to take that. Okay, so thank everyone so much. Thank you, Enna and Manjuri and Kristina. Wonderful hearing from you and learning from you today. You're amazing leaders out there doing amazing work and I really appreciate the time. Would like to remind everyone that our next webinar is on February 25th. It's going to be actually with Amazon and Smart Recruiters, actually. And it's going to be about the strategies to mitigate unconscious bias. So I know that it's really a sort of a heated topic and sort of how to address that and how to deal with that. So it's going to be a good one. But thank you again to all three of you. Thank you to all of you who tuned in today. And best of luck with you. Stay healthy, stay strong, and we will see you next time. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.